Well, good day, everybody. Today is uh, can be an intense day for some people. Um, it can be a high distress level for some people. Why? Because it's the wrap up of the presidential elections, and especially important for those down south, those of you who are American. For the others of you who are not or don't reside in the United States, you're probably feeling some of the impact not only of the elections, but also of all the things that have been happening in the last year, especially the COVID pandemic. And that all being the case, our work never stops, does it? I'm a family counselor and have been for the last 10 years, working with families in high levels of conflict, but I've been a professional counselor for the last 30 years. And so if you're watching this video for the first time, or my video series and my YouTube channel, then that's a bit of who I am very quickly. And I hope you'll watch some of the other videos and kind of see what else I'm up to. Um, but today, as I'm preparing for my parent leadership group, yes, it's Tuesday, it's November 3rd, and I am thinking about bringing up the topic of boundaries. But I want to bring it up from a different perspective, or a perspective that's often neglected. So I'm going to title kind of my focus for tonight is boundaries, inside and out. A lot of times when we talk about boundaries, we're talking more about outer boundaries, I think, where parents and people want to establish boundaries with family members or with their children, um, or spouses or what have you. And boundaries are very, very important. um, Brene Brown has a really nice and interesting video on boundaries, and she talks about people with boundaries are actually the most capable of empathy. So it's very important to have boundaries. But what I'm going to bring to the table here in this discussion briefly, and I'm going to show you a little bit about what I'm going to do tonight, because in tonight's parent leadership group, I'm going to refer to a particular wisdom teaching. So, in the parent leadership group, we do refer a lot to wisdom teachings that come out of a lot of different traditions, especially spiritual traditions, because we are always, as parent leaders and as individuals, wanting to be men and women of integrity and wanting to raise children of integrity. We always want to be, first of all, lifelong learners, students of a path of truth, that's another name for discipline. So we want to be disciplined individuals, and we want to seek out wisdom. That's really the only way that we know psychologically, and whether or not how we're seeing the world is accurate. We've got to basically seek out higher levels of truth and wisdom to see how we're doing, and it'll give us some feedback about that. So I'm going to introduce a piece of wisdom tonight, a wisdom teaching that comes from a Zen background, in order to help parents see the topic of boundaries more from the inside look. What is the inside look? Well, whether it be boundaries outside or inside, boundaries start really, or are a result of, our inner values, beliefs, or convictions. So, for instance, if I say that a value that I hold dear, a conviction that I have, is one of respect. So if I asked you, what is it you stand for? You might say that I stand for respect. Okay. The challenge then is what? Is to try to embody that, is to try to live that out from day to day in terms of how you engage people, how you speak to people, etc. When you can do a good job at that, we would call you a person of integrity. Okay. Um, Integrity means basically being one with, whole, or undivided. One with, whole, or undivided. One with what? Your core convictions. Undivided from what? Your core convictions. One with, whole, or undivided. Okay. Um, the opposite of that, of course, is disintegration, or when somebody is scattered. When somebody acts one way, says one thing and they do another. So that schism right there, that disintegration, there's a loss of integrity between the value a person holds dear and the way they conduct themselves. That person, what would be what we call out of integrity. Okay. So when it comes to boundaries, our inner convictions and our familiarity with them. So the more familiarity I have with my inner convictions, values, beliefs, whatever you want to call them, the better I should be able to live those out in the world. Okay. Now there's how I conduct myself in the outer world and what I expect of people, and then there's my inner world. Okay, that I also need to pay attention to. So they're inside and out. Boundaries, like a boundary is kind of a line drawn between one point and the other. As I said, if I say that I stand for respect, then all of a sudden there's a line drawn in the sand. It basically says, John, you can do this, but you can't do that. Sometimes we talk about people who cross the line, or we go too far, or we're overzealous, or we let our emotions get the best of us. Those are all different references for when we cross the line. Cross the line of what? A boundary that has been set up, that has been established by a value that we say we stand for or that we hold dear. Okay? So again, these boundaries apply both outside and inside. All right. So let me give you an example here, because I don't want to take too long today with this, but I want to give you a little taste of what the parent leadership group is like. And this story that I'm going to share with you right now is one that we use all the time. It comes from a Zen tradition. Here's the title of the story. What are you doing? What are you saying? Now, I don't want to go into that first paragraph, but here's the story. Okay. So there was a Zen master, Munan, who once had his only successor. His name was Soju. After Soju had completed his study of Zen, Munan called him into his room. I'm getting old, he said. As far as I know, Soju, you are the only one who can carry on this teaching. Here is a book. It has been passed down from master to master for 7 generations. I have also added many points according to my own understanding. The book is very valuable, and I'm giving it to you to represent your successorship. If the book is such an important thing, you'd better keep it, Soju replied. I received your Zen without writing, and I'm satisfied with it as it is. I know that, said Munan. Even so, this work has been carried from master to master for 7 generations, so you may keep it as a symbol of having received the teaching here. The two happened to be standing before a brazier, like a fireplace, and the instant Soju felt the book in his hands, he thrust it into the flaming coals. He had no lust for possessions. Munan, who had never been angry before, yelled, "What are you doing?" And Soju shouted back, "What are you saying?" Now, this is one of the longer teaching stories that we've used in the parent leadership groups, but it's a really, really good story. And I'm going to try to just condense it really quickly so you can maybe see it in relation to tonight's topic, especially when it comes to boundaries, but on the inside. All right. So here we have a master, if you will, a teacher and a student. And the student has reached a certain level of success, if you will, graduated. The master wants to hand to him, as a symbol of this graduation, as a symbol that he's reached a certain level of competency, a book. The book is an instructional book, apparently, is what it says. And Munan himself has even added his own personal notes that has given him success. And this book has been passed on for 7 generations, right? And so it should be a great honor, right, to Soju that he received the book. And of course, Soju would hold on to that, carry it with him, keep it safe, and then maybe someday he would pass it on to one of his favorite students. So it would seem like an honor. And yet what we have is that here's Munan, the teacher, trying to hand the book to Soju, and he keeps saying, "No, not really that interested. I got your teachings, I got them, but I don't need them. I don't need them in writing. The way you gave them to me was really good, just as they are. I'm good." right? And Munon keeps insisting that he take the book, that he keep insisting that he take the instruction, that he take the instructional book, because it's been carried for 7 generations, and he himself even put his own notes in there. So it's not only, this history of folks that Soju wouldn't have known, but it's also very personal because his own beloved teacher had also put notes in the book. So it carries a lot of, I guess you could say, importance generationally. Munuan continues to force the book, and he forced it. Soju takes it, but only briefly, only long enough to throw it into a fireplace. And of course, Munan, who was never known to ever lose his temper, loses his temper and says, "What are you doing?" And the young man shakes his head, says, "What are you saying?" Right? And so we see at the end that there's conflict between the master and the student. They're seeing things differently. Now, of course, when I use this story in a parent leadership group, or when I'm sharing it with families, or even a parent individually, or a young person, or what have you, the task is to try to take what's in the story and apply it to their situation, which is a family situation. And here we can see that we have maybe something like a parent trying to hand knowledge to their son or daughter, trying to hand knowledge to very likely a teenager. Okay. And at first, the parent, in this case, Munan, trying to hand this book over to Soju as, I guess you could say, as a gift, as an honor. And that's where that's where you can see the tensions start to build in the relationship when he starts to try to do that. Now, for the purposes of what I want to illustrate about boundaries, insight, as well as outside, is that most of the time, this is a very common dynamic for parents to end up in conflict in. Why? Because parents feel like they want to hand over all this knowledge and wisdom to their son or daughter, especially their teen son or daughter, only to have the teen reject it, only to have the teen resist receiving it. And of course, the parent will tell a story about, all they've been through and all the energy they've invested in order to assemble this body of knowledge that has been very valuable for them and their success. And then they will try to keep forcing it onto the teen. And it kind of gets thrown into the fire. And you can see the symbolism there. There's always a potential fire in a relationship. There's always a potential fire. And there's ways that we feed the fire, right? There's ways. Now, that's the thing about fire, isn't it? Fire can be a wonderful thing, like in a fireplace, to warm us up and to bring us comfort. But there's ways that we can fuel the fire or feed the fire that aren't always healthy, if you will, or just things that we do as human beings that feed that fire. All right. Now you throw it into the fire as well, and it can't be retrieved. And sometimes parents have to come to that conclusion that no matter how hard they try to give this wisdom to their sons or daughters, and their sons and daughters just keep rejecting it, it's just going to get consumed in this fire. And you can't get it out. Like, you can't bring it back. It's a done deal. It's a final deal. So in examining this, like, say for instance, in facilitating a group discussion, I might ask the question, first of all, well, as parents and you're witnessing this, how do you feel about it? What's your take on it? What do you think is going on here? And the parents will usually come up with, well, that wasn't right for the student to reject the master's book. Look how many people have made contribution. Look at how, this master has kept this book, has assembled this book, has kept it in safekeeping, has even added his own notes, like invested his own energy and time to write in it, to give this young person a you know uh, some more wisdom, some more teachings to help them be successful. And for this son to or daughter to just throw this in the fireplace like this, to just disregard it, is a shameful act. It's a very disrespectful act. This is just so disrespectful. And a lot of parents feel that way when their sons or daughters, if you will, kind of are reluctant to receive their wisdom, or if they discard their wisdom, that parents often feel disrespected. Okay. And then a parent would ask for respect. They would get angry and frustrated and ask for respect. So there's the outer demand for some sort of a boundary. This is my boundary. I demand respect. How dare you disrespect me? I want you to respect me. So they're trying to set up a boundary of respect. That's the outside. But can you see what the inside boundary violation is? See, this is a teaching story. And of course, we wrestle with teaching stories because they're meant to take us somewhere deeper. It's meant to take us beyond the traditional, beyond our own perspectives. And so as we wrestle with the story, if you will, look at it again as a teaching story. What is it? What might it say? Why does it end up this way? Good, this is what parents wrestle with all the time. This is part of the agony that parents wrestle with. I just wanted the best for my son or daughter. I just wanted to give them a good life. I just wanted them to do better than me. I just wanted them to not make the mistakes that I made. So there's all this kind of good intention stuff that it seems to originate out of, right? So that's all very traditional, all very traditional. And yet, if it were also loving, if you will, also for the youth's best interest, why did it end up so bad, right? Why did it end in conflict? Why did it end up with the parent feeling disrespected and maybe even a little heartbroken? Why did it end up with the youth feeling guilty and frustrated and angry and deflated? Here's why, right? You, you have to ask yourself, or you have to begin to investigate, what is the point of parenting? The point of parenting is to liberate. That's one point of parenting. Now, liberate does not mean to tell our kids what to do. That's called obedience. Liberate is kind of being given the room to be free to make some of your own choices, which is what we as parents want. We want our sons and daughters to become their own man or their own woman, to become authentic human beings, not just human doings. We want our kids to become their own person, their own man, their own woman, authentic human beings. The world is in great need of authenticity, to be true to yourself, and that's what's also called integrity. If I give my son or daughter a manual on how to do life, on what to believe, on how to do things, and the parent would be probably very happy to see their son or daughter follow that book to a T. But that's not really a parent's heart desire. A parent's heart's desire is to have their son and daughter become their own unique person. And so for that to happen, there has to be a boundary between the parent and the youth. The parent has to understand what their true heart's desire is. Right? So, for instance, in order to exercise respect, so if a parent may say, I stand for respect. Okay, you can see it in the outside world, but what you can't see is how you violated respect on the inside. Well, how did I violate respect? How did I violate the value of respect myself? Well, because you tried to give your son and daughter an instruction manual. And that would have made you feel good as a parent to see them follow in your footsteps. to follow your advice to the T, so they could experience the success that you've experienced. But that does not allow your son or daughter to make their own decisions, to become their own person, and that's your true heart's desire. You may have almost competing desires. One desire is for your son or daughter to not get in trouble, to stay healthy, to not, make the same bad mistakes that you made, to have a better life than you. Those might be your desires. And so from your desires, you may want them to hold on to this book and follow the instructions. But that's all about you, parent. If you want your son or daughter to become their own man or their own woman, they've got to have an opportunity to do what? Exercise free will choice. In other words, to make some decisions on their own about how they will move forward and experience the consequences so they can learn how to be accountable and responsible. This is what we call maturation or individuation, becoming your own person. And this is how it happens. And the more, parent, you try to force this, as Munan did in the story, the more tension, the more fire you're going to create until it erupts into a conflict. It escalates, if you will, and it can very well destroy the relationship unless you understand the internal boundary violation. There was internal boundaries here that were violated. And this is what is so difficult for most parents and most people to understand. Like we're much more, I guess you could say, prone or biased towards seeing how other people have infringed upon our boundaries, but we don't take the time to self-reflect and see, well, how did I violate the boundaries here? And this boundary violated, as this story illustrates, and as I'm trying to unpackage this more and more, this boundary violation is actually the parent violating their own boundary. As I said, because in the heart of every parent, we want our sons and daughters to become unique, authentic human beings, to be their own man or their own woman. If my son follows my advice and my instruction without, without question, then he becomes, at best, a copy of me. And that also does not satisfy my heart's desire. Because why? My heart's desire is for my son to move beyond me. So if my son obeys me and never, without question, then that might feel good to my own ego or my own insecurity, might appease it, might pacify my own insecurity, but I'm also undermining or violating my own inner desire, my own boundary. Can you see how this is more difficult to get your head around? For anybody to get their head around? But this is the mature task. And this is why these wisdom stories are so important, because they give us opportunity to examine ourselves a little more deeply, to see how we ourselves, are more implicated in this situation than we thought. Which, the more we can see that, the more we can see how we've contributed to the tension and conflict, the more opportunity we have to be accountable and responsible, which should lead to a healthy sense of humility, which helps restore the relationship. And it also reminds us, hey, you know, I need to get on track with my deeper convictions. I need to facilitate individuation. I need to help my son or daughter become their own man or their own woman. And how do I do that? Well, I can't lecture. I can't tell them what to do. See, these are all the mistakes that parents make, especially when they get scared, when they get distressed. The more oftentimes a parent gets distressed or more anxious they get, the more they try to force the book, the more they try to force their knowledge and wisdom upon their child. And the more they do that, the bigger the fire grows and the more tension that grows. And they want to blame the youth for being disrespectful, when in truth, it is the parent who's been the most disrespectful, has violated that inner boundary the most. Now, to be able to discover this is a great act of maturity and a great act of leadership. But that's what these wisdom stories are designed to do. So I hope this has been helpful in terms of understanding the inner boundary. And it's that inner boundary, if you will, that is the most important, that deep conviction that we have, what we might call our heart's desire, values that we hold dear to our hearts, can sometimes run in conflict with some of the, I guess you could say, desires and expectations we have at a more ego level, or expectations and ideas that come out of our fear or our guilt, and how a parent can very quickly find themselves becoming their own worst enemy when they don't understand that internal conflict. All right. Well, if you're interested in joining our groups, this is the kind of stuff that we talk about. We unpackage this stuff and we get in pretty deep, because otherwise, it would kind of be a waste of our time to get together if we weren't going deep, right? There's a lot of stuff offered out in the world that would kind of be at a very shallow level, but this group is designed to really dig in, and to do that in a very easy and respectful way through the wisdom teachings. So I hope you can join us. Take care.